Oh,
Hi.
hi. Hello, Naomi.
Hey, Frank. Hi. I just came out and came in because I felt like I came in, I was the only one in and it was recording.
Hi, Sarah. Who
Have
knows?
they got to us already, you know? Waiting for us to incriminate ourselves.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Who knows? But Jackie is theoretically
Mhm.
handling this.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So how are you folks doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, it's just good news, really good news about this bill. I had heard wind of it, but this was the most kind of
Yeah, I
detail
mean
I'd
it's
had of it.
it's something anyway. I mean
Mhm.
we'll talk about it.
Mhm.
It's something that should have happened a long time ago, but you know the difficulties of we know about. But I read it pretty closely and other things, so I don't know.
It's very well
We'll see.
phrased, I think, you know, children and families, because that does pretty much
Yeah,
cover everyone. Everyone is in a family, so
right.
um,
Well,
I think
yeah,
it's diplomatically phrased, you know, strategically phrased.
yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. It's
Mm.
that's true. But I mean, you know, we'll talk more. The emphasis is on a lot of it's on children, but in a lot of the things that been happening to children have been happening to adults as well, like you know, the detentions, administrative
Mhm.
detentions, and the
Mhm.
mistreatment and so forth. But yeah, I guess you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with those people have parents and brothers and sisters and children, so I think that the inclusion of
Right,
family does.
right. But you know, it was more focused on children, I
Is
think,
it? Yeah.
and I think you're right. It was
Mhm.
done strategically.
Mhm.
You got to start somewhere, and that
Mhm.
definitely resonates with
Mhm.
should resonate with everyone.
Yeah.
You know, or as many people as possible, you know, but we'll see. I don't know. I'll see what, oh, there she is.
Mhm.
She's on. Sorry. Yeah. Hello,
Hey,
Jackie.
Jackie. Hey.
We can't hear you. For some reason, you're muted. Can't
Hello.
hear you.
Okay, now I can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I just got back from Brooklyn dropping my grandkids off at the botanical gardens. And traffic, of course, is insane. They have
Yeah.
guys riding their bikes up and down West Street as a protest, I guess, against all the police garbage that's going on. So, um, Naomi, so great to see you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Great to be back. Gosh, I love your backdrop today.
Yeah,
Yeah, what is
Yeah.
your backdrop?
Yeah.
that's a painting that I did in Jordan of the 10 most endangered archaeological sites. Uh, and
You
each I
collage them on.
painted over them. And actually, the mayor of Amman bought it for his office, you
It's
know, so I was
beautiful.
Cool.
excited. Yeah, thank
How
you. Yeah,
large
he
is
liked
it?
it's about 4 by 6 feet, you know, it's a good size. And
Yeah,
I did archaeological research and I did a presentation at a couple of archaeology conferences and different groups about the endangered. You know, the archaeology is very endangered in the Middle East. And that's another topic that I want to talk about.
Mm.
Part of it is government neglect, like Jordan, where they don't have the resources and money. And also, a lot of the people think that there's gold buried in some of the old ruins. So they dig up, you know, ancient ruins looking for gold. And then there's also deliberate sabotage of archaeological sites in Israel and Palestine. There's kind of a rivalry that goes on over the heritage. So the Israelis, some of them are very good at trying to get rid of some of the archaeological sites. And then there's, so there's this kind of battle that goes on over the heritage and archaeological sites, the preservation of the sites, particularly in Jerusalem, where they have that King David city that they set up that's very doubtfully, most of these archaeological scholars dispute the archaeology behind that as being, David city traditionally, but it's part of a political. So my jaw's just. They were stuck in traffic in the car too. So anyhow, so good to see you, Frank and Naomi, and we're waiting for Fareed. So I want to. What I thought I might do is read a little bit about this amazing thing. Naomi, I'm not sure if you know what's been happening in the United States. It's quite astonishing. Let me shut up, my dogs. Hold on.
Oh, we can't hear you now.
I say the word muzzle and she shuts up. So, okay, so what's happened is this very astonishing situation of this woman legislature in the Middle West of all places, Betsy McCollum, who has actually launched legislation to complain about the let's see if I can find it. I had it saved on here. She actually launched legislation to here it is. Historic legislation defending the human rights of Palestinian children and families under the Israeli Military Occupation Act. This is in Congress, legislation in Congress. I'm just going to read this article because I think it's very helpful for background. Congressman Betty McCollum from Minnesota released the following statement today after introducing the Defending the Human Rights of Palestinian Children and Families Living Under Israeli Military Occupation Act, building upon legislation she introduced into the 115th and 116th Congresses to promote the human rights and safety of Palestinian children. Now, I wrote an article several years ago when I was in Amman, when I discovered how many children are being put in Israeli prisons. And I was very shocked. And I sent the article to African friend of mine who was working for the UN, and he sent it out to a lot of the UN personnel. I did a lot of research, but the numbers are truly shocking over the arrests of children. Some of them as young as like 5 years old, get thrown in, and they're very traumatized, of course, for life, these kids. McCollum's legislation prohibits Israel from using U.S. taxpayer dollars in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem for the military detention, abuse, or ill treatment of Palestinian children in Israeli military detention, to support the seizure and destruction of Palestinian property and homes in violation of international humanitarian law, or to extend any assistance or support for Israel's unilateral annexation of Palestinian territory in violation of international humanitarian law. And that comes down to the settlements, okay? So this is like really major. And she says, U.S. assistance intended for Israeli security must never be used to violate the human rights of Palestinian children, demolish the homes of Palestinian families, or to permanently annex Palestinian lands, McCollum said. Peace can only be achieved by respecting human rights, especially the rights of children. And this includes the U.S. taking responsibility for how taxpayer-funded aid is used by recipient countries, Israel included. Congress must stop ignoring the unjust and blatantly cruel mistreatment of Palestinian children and families living under Israeli military occupation. And that was always one of my favorite mantras when I was ranting about the situation in Palestine, that I said, this is done with my tax money. Hey, Fareed, welcome. Welcome. Good.
Hey,
Kind of
hi.
great.
It
That
really,
really objected to the use of my tax money for this occupation. So when people say, well, why do you treat Israel with a higher standard, a different standard than, say, Indonesia or Malaysia or some other country where they violate human rights? And I would always say, because they're using my tax money, they're using my money to do this stuff. So, Malaysia, I don't pay taxes that go to Malaysia military that I know of, although maybe they do. But that there's a direct connection between American taxpayer and Israeli activity, on every level. We fund everything, plus the huge amount of donors, American donors to these things, so that Americans, we do have a right to criticize Israel. We're not separating them from other people. I can criticize all the other violators of human rights as well. However, because my money is being used to do it, it's a different story. She continues, I strongly believe there's a growing consensus among the American people that the Palestinian people deserve justice, equality, human rights, and the right to self-determination. The unprecedented endorsement of this bill by human rights organizations, as well as Christian, Jewish, and Muslim organizations, is indicative of an energized movement in support of human rights for Palestinians. It is time for Americans, especially members of Congress, to stand with Palestinians and Israelis who seek a future of peace and justice. So this is a pretty big deal, almost shocking to see this being introduced in Congress. And here are the original sponsors. You can see the list of them. People, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, Ivana Presley, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the squad. People we call these congresswomen the squad, or have all signed on for it. And then look at the list of endorsing organizations. I think this is very hopeful, because we see a lot of Jewish organizations included in this. And I think this is something Sarah's going to talk about. She's works with Jewish Voice for Peace as an activist for them. And I think that more publicity needs to be given to the Jews in America who are not drinking the Kool-Aid, Netanyahu's Kool-Aid, and are actively funding peace groups and they're not funding the Zionist ultra-right Jewish groups. So that's something Sarah will talk to us more about when she returns. So this is good. Hi, Sarah. So this is good news. So who wants to start with their comments? Fareed, Frank, Sarah, Naomi, what would you like to say?
Could I just start a little bit here? I
Yeah,
normally don't, but
no.
I just want to say that as we were talking before with Naomi and Sarah, hi Farid, this is a good beginning. It's still, even though it's great and it's a great initiative, I don't want to be the devil's advocate to the extent that just be negative, but we all realize this should have been done long time ago. Not just it's way overdue, but you can't blame the activists that are behind it because of all the difficulties, all the roadblocks. Okay, but let's cut to the chase here. This is a bill, right, that has left the committee. That's huge. In other words, whatever committee it was that was discussing it, just getting out of the committee and on the floor of Congress is huge to be voted on.
Right.
It's hard to say whether it will be adopted. I'd like to be optimistic. Probably not, but
yeah,
it's a beginning.
Right.
The deal is this, though, and in my opinion, and then we'll get around to it eventually, just to kind of throw it out right now. At the end of the day, what's the teeth of this bill? At the end, if you look at the end, it says, we'll make a report to the Appropriations Committee. We're saying this is illegal, to support a country that detains children, detains anyone on administrative detention, illegal to destroy their homes, collective punishment with demolitions, illegal to transfer them forcibly. So much in violation of international law to begin with, and all specific examples that we can go through. All it says is at the end is we're going to, first of all, the good thing is these activities are illegal for the United States to authorize them and to pay with our tax dollars. Okay, fine. It can be then used, if it's adopted, to oppose any type of appropriations to a potential war criminal, which is up and before the ICC right now. Fine. But what it says at the end is, we'll just have reports, to the Appropriations Committee, and the reports are going to include whether, on the one hand, Israel has complied and not used our money to do these things, or it has not complied. And the rest is up to the committee to make a decision. My take on this, to throw it out right now, is this does not have enough teeth. In other words, I understand it's a beginning, but what's needed to be done is there's so much evidence out there, including the ICC prosecutor who has said most likely, and he cannot proceed without a lot of evidence showing there's clear war crimes committed by Israel, but we're proceeding through the final investigation and hopefully get an arrest warrant or summons to appear soon, with whether it be Netanyahu or who else, Gantz or Lieberman, et cetera, maybe even Trump or Obama. But at the end of the day, it's not saying anything about these violations. I think it should be the reverse. We should start it and say, there's clear evidence that Israel has violated international. We don't need an ICC decision to determine this. Come on. And then this is what we need to do. In other words, since there is clear evidence that Israel is going to have to show, right now we're cutting off everything. All our appropriations, our deductions for arms, all the billions of dollars we're giving Israel, until Israel can show that it is complying with this. In other words, it is no longer putting people in administrative detention, children, adults alike. It is decided it is going to remove from the blockade of Gaza. It is decided, it is with Palestinians, of course, that it's going to end this occupation. We're going to work on as a state of Palestinian, and East Jerusalem will be the capital of the Palestine. If that happens, then we will reissue the money. We will then give deductions for weapons and so forth. I think it should be articulated in that way.
In the best of all possible worlds, I think that
yes,
would be
in the
good.
best
Fareed,
of all popular world.
Fareed, what do you think?
I will start by, I'm going to agree with Frank on some points and disagree with him on other points. You're going to a very impossible point, which is America ditching Israel. That's going to be an impossibility. That's not going to happen. The AIPAC and many other very rich Jewish population in the US is not going to have it happen. I'm not going to be asking for that. So that's where I differ with you. That's going to be a huge mountain to climb. What I might wanted to make a point, I made a few points while you were talking and why I read the article and everything. I wanted to say, why is it so easy for America to cut the Palestinian aid so like blunt and done and gone and there and we're the bad people and et cetera. Why are you looking what they did in Gaza? Well, are you looking about fish in a barrel, how they were fishing and sniping, other than children, everybody. The whole world saw what happened in Gaza 3 times and nothing moved. And
They're
then it was
bombing Gaza again. My friends in Gaza told me they've been bombing them again this week.
Israel has such an open green light. I don't know how they got to it, but it's a long process. It's many years in the making, but it has to do a lot with the Mossad and many agencies that come here, the current climate, the history, they come to the US and they keep spreading their venom in the American, I don't know where, but they're doing it in areas where it's very, very effective. Hollywood, Washington, and etc. And I know I'm repeating myself in history. Everybody knows it. But I want to get to a point where about the teeth and no teeth, this has been tried before 2 times. And the bill got killed. They didn't even reach a bill. They just nixed it. This is going to get nixed again. And I'm hoping to God, all these people who are supporting it are not going to get blacklisted. It's just what happened with Carter, what's happening with Bernie Sanders. I don't see, I know it's Ramadan for me and I have to be patient and I had to this and I can't curse today. It's very hard for me. That's the
We'll
hardest
miss
part.
that. We'll miss that, Farid.
I have such a bad mouth.
I'll put
But-
footnotes in on the
Getting
transcript.
back to the point, and I appreciate Naomi's support, telling them a man of faith. It's so hard for me, Naomi, not to curse. So getting back to the point of teeth, no teeth, I don't see any viable anything in it because all of these voices are going to get shut down so bad, so strong. I don't know where to go, to what core, who to move and not, and who to reach or not in the Congress. They are so corrupt. They're so blinded. They're so afraid, actually. That's the word. They are very afraid of saying anything. The next day, I apologize profusely to anything they say. So I'm an activist. We get the poetry. I'm always wanting to know how to go around that corner, which he said. I know I'm going around in circles, but I'm not. I would love this to have anything happening with it. I don't see it in the near future. I just want to tap back to the point of how they cut the Palestinian aid so fast, and they cannot seem to do that with Israel. Israel has such a hole, and I think I know some of the reason. Israel is very good for America to be there because it's a point for them of sort of stability or something, and they can just go there and actually Israel gets used by the USA at a point where at least they know they're there, so they know what they're dealing with. I don't know. That's all I'm gonna say for now. Frustrating, but
The
hopeful.
money we give, the money we give Israel,
They don't deserve it.
Can't hear you.
Hey,
They're
money
selling
that-
enough
Jackie,
weapons.
we need
They don't
you.
need it. They don't need it. They don't need the
the-
money.
the money that we give Israel, they buy our weapons with. So you're right. It's a sweetheart deal that we buy a lot of things from Israel, a lot of products and spy shit, but the money we give them, they use to buy American goods. So part of the issue is that a lot of the military industrial complex would lose out if we weren't giving that money to Israel to buy stuff from them. So this is the part of the problem also, that it's an economic sweetheart deal for both sides, gain economically. But if we think about South Africa, that it was really not military might or economic might, but really moral pressure with the boycott, which was very important. And that's really what, that's why I feel BDS is so important. And that's why Israel's so afraid of it. Sarah, you're working with Jewish Voice for Peace. Would you
Well,
like to talk to us about, because Jewish Voice for Peace was a sponsor of this legislation, and their rabbi has been receiving death threats for signing on to this. And it's Jews who speak out are, Fareed, what you were saying is quite true. They're retaliated against in a pretty vicious way. So, Sarah, can you share
Well,
where you?
okay. First of all, I'm very terrified speaking to all of you because you all know so much more about this subject than I do. I had to disappear and get a glass of wine.
Oh, it's Ramadan. You're
I,
killing me.
I had my husband print out what I was going to say, and I had a big fight with him about it because he's not religious, but he said, "Oh, you're just meaning me. I'm so naive to, drink the Kool-Aid with all these people from JVP and these different groups." And I can't legitimately say that I'm a real activist. I mean, I painted a tree for that was in the Judson Memorial Church for one of the JVP things. I've gone to some of their actions, but I've basically been hiding out from COVID in the country. So I'm not a real activist in the same way that all of you are, I'm sure. What I don't understand, I have more questions than things to say. I know that when the statement came out by IHRA, defining anti-Semitism, JVP was very upset by it and issued their own statement, which basically said that there's really no security for Jewish people unless there is, recognition of human rights and equality for Palestinians and Israelis. So they were very against the concept of, being, of this establishing Jewish, peace and it, um, not promoting anti-Semitism. The other thing is the thing that also upset everybody was that this was used, this IHRA alliance, their promotion of what was in their statement about the Jewish state also led to funds being taken away from universities and colleges, or the threat of funds being taken away from universities and colleges who did not adhere to these rules. In other words, if you had a professor saying that, criticism of Israel was okay, then he was in danger, or she, of being fired. This was something that they weren't going to tolerate. And of course, this is a huge diminution of civil rights, free speech. And to me, as an American Jew, I resent being criticized by other Jews as being anti Semitic just because I voice criticism of Israel. And I can really, excuse me, not now, excuse me, not now. I'm sorry. I'm just getting my husband out of the room because he didn't agree with me. So I don't want him here while I'm talking. Anyway, that slammed the door. Good. So for me, I don't want to be considered anti-Semitic just because I criticize Israel. I'm offended by it. And also, there are very few people that I can talk to until I met JVP people in New York, where I could express my opinions. So all of it, but the thing that I don't understand that I wanted to ask you about, all of you, because you're more knowledgeable than I am, is why the United States, and you began to touch on it, is so frightened of putting sanctions on Israel. We don't need the oil anymore, really, because, we're going towards other forms of energy. So, that's not a big deal. I think that psychologically, the United States needs Israel as an ally for strategic purposes. Maybe they need a friend, what they consider a friend in the area, and maybe even to, coordinate sabotage efforts against Iran or something. I mean, I don't understand why the United States is so frightened of condemning Israel for anything. I do understand that there's an enormous pull because of, what happened in the Holocaust, and many, my father raised a lot of money for the Anti-Defamation League. He was a big leader in that. And I don't understand now, like I could understand maybe 40 years ago, that was a big thrust. I don't understand now why the same super wealthy American Jews who supported Trump are giving money to, create this Jewish state without any idea of partition or a two-state solution. And I don't understand what the pull is. I don't understand why the United States, the country that I live in, is so terrified. What is the hold that the wealthy Jews have on our government? I don't understand it. And I have to say also that, having been born, during the time of the Holocaust, and my family having escaped to the United States earlier than that, I would probably not be alive if I had lived in Europe at that time. So I'm glad theoretically that Israel exists. But I have to say that you may not, some of you may not agree with me, but I want it to exist as a true democracy and a state that has morality and is brave and righteous and includes freedom for all. So I'm glad it's there, but not the way it is now. Now, of course, my husband screams at me, well, they almost had a peace deal when Rabin was president. And then, Arafat was afraid he was going to be killed, assassinated if he signed it. That's not going anywhere while in the future, with Bibi still in control of the government. So what do? What is the hope for Israel changing? And what is the hope for the United States being not afraid to sanction Israel? And what is behind that? So I have more questions than answers. Does anybody want to enlighten me? I'll be thrilled if someone can make me more knowledgeable.
Well, I'd just like to bring up one point that I don't think's been touched on, and that is the Christian Zionists. Because, there are 40 million Christian Zionists, and there are
Yeah.
only 15 million Jews in the world, as far as I know, and that's all Jews, not of whom only some are Zionist.
You're
And
talking about the evangelicals
the evangelicals, and they are so embedded in the American political system.
well.
They are right up to the top, aren't they? They are the right in America. So there's all of that funding that is all about the people that they're putting into power, but there's also an awful lot of not just taxpayers' money, but donations that individual churches are making, and in some cases it's people who are got no shoes. They're poor people, but they're being told, if you give to Israel, you'll be rewarded in the next life, or we will get what we want if we give to Israel. And lo and behold, that bit of land that we wanted came up for sale right after we made that big donation. That must prove that God. And I've watched a documentary on this, and it is very alarming because it's so opportunistic that the Israelis, the Jewish Israelis who are coming over and collecting this money, and kind of, they're coming over to speak in the churches, and they know that this is not because they actually even want to, they care about them, or they want to support Israel. Even they don't care about the safety of the Jews. They care about the rapture. They care about this mythical time when, you know, the whole world's going to enter into Armageddon, and they're going to be saved, and anyone who isn't a Christian is going to be, you know, going to fry in hell. So, and that mindset is massive, and it's something that's very, you know, alien to my way of thinking, and to my social, you know, I don't have any connections with that at all. But I think it is a massive actor in this scenario.
Naomi, my cousin is actually an Israeli Jew for Jesus.
Mhm.
And he's a rabbi, and he's a very prominent and important Jew for Jesus. And he's makes a lot of money. He lives quite well, has tons of money. He's a musician also, or does records, makes CDs, and you know, for these Christian Zionist, you know, groups. And he gets piles of money, all from the evangelicals. Now, you know, I'm a Christian too, and you know, I'm Jewish background, but I'm mixed, you know, and we totally have totally different opposite views of Christianity. So it's kind of interesting. And you know, he thinks I'm going to hell, you know, because I support the Muslims and the Palestinians, blah blah blah, you know. But he does speaking tours and all of that stuff, Naomi, which is what you're talking about. So there's a huge influence within Israel itself of these fundamentalists, and he has a huge following, and they get in trouble with the Israeli government. The Israeli government doesn't like them, and once in a while buses loads of Orthodox come and, you know, threaten them, and you know, and but they're very big in Israel. There's really actually quite a huge amount of them in Israel, and I think the evangelicals have never had the political power before that they've had today. They were always kind of kept as a like Eisenhower and Truman were critical of Israel, and they you know, they were Christians, but they weren't infected by this fundamentalism. And you're absolutely right. And the growth of fundamentalism, I think, under Trump, really, Trump is the one who really helped them grow and helped make the connection. Um, and the thing is, of course, they all think the Jews are going to either convert or go to hell at the time of the rapture. You know, so they don't really care about the Jews.
No.
Could I just suggest that we link this to the bill, because it's the theme of this is the bill, and people are going to be accessing this. And I think Naomi and Sarah, Farid and Jacqueline, everything you're saying are still relevant to this bill. Why, for instance, well, for one thing, Farid, I did not say that this bill is, we're going to, my suggestion is we're going to ditch Israel, just place conditions on our economic aid. But
no, I said the two bit. No, Frank.
Well, let me finish. I was saying that we need to stop allocations until Israel complies with international law. That doesn't mean we're going to ditch them as an ally. That means we're going to give them any money. That means we need some proof, as opposed to simply saying, because this bill said it at the end, well, what we're going to do is have reports to the Appropriation Committee, whether it's what Israel is doing with our money conforms to this bill or not. And if not, then we'll let the Appropriations Committee make a decision, or we'll submit it to Congress. But to me, that's why I thought we need a little more teeth here, even though you're right. To get this adopted, it's still big to have the bill, it's huge, but to get it adopted, it might make it even more difficult. But the reality, I think, needs to be addressed in that light, without abandoning Israel as an ally. And that's not what I'm suggesting. But this idea of fear, Sarah, and everything that we're talking about right now, I think a lot of this, the fact that this bill was not submitted, well, there were things that McCollum submitted before, and other people that Farid mentioned that fell short. But a lot of the fear, what you're saying, the Christian Zionist movement and so forth, but the fear thing a lot of it is many of these politicians, including Pelosi and Trump and Clinton and a whole line of Congress people, are getting money from Israel. And I think this support, not all in all cases, but the staunch support of Israel comes from these politicians afraid of cutting off the money trail for them. It's a selfish thing for me. It's not making that decision. We're going to help Israel, and it's not good for the United States. That should be their decision. But no, it's basically, you know, we're going to maintain our power. We're getting money from Israel. Even though what some of they're doing, things that they're doing, we don't agree with, we're going to continue supporting Israel, giving them unbridled support because we're getting money. And this is part of the fear. This is just another aspect. They're afraid of losing that power and money to do the right thing, but you know, and they therefore don't do the right thing. That's just one aspect of it.
Do you mean they're getting money for their campaigns?
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Have you ever
It's been
seen
proven.
But they're not getting checks written out to them.
I'm not sure how they're
They
getting
are.
paid, but they're
No,
getting
no.
millions. They're getting
I've
millions
done
of dollars.
research. I've done research on this. There's some very interesting articles and research following the money, where there's lists of each politician and where they're getting money from pro-Israel groups. And it's pretty shocking and depressing when you see it. But the thing is, you got to shine a spotlight on it. And I think that this bill presents an opportunity to shine the spotlight on it. And I think one of the things that they're most fearful of is BDS, because BDS is, you know, economically hurting them. But aside from that, I mean, everybody should write to their congressman. We should, and my congressman is Jerry Nadler, who's very pro-Israel. I happen to know him and I bump into him all the time. And every time I see him, I argue with him about Palestine. And I've noticed over the years, he's taken a softer stand. He's not as pro-fanatically Israel, but he gets huge money from Jewish donors in New York. But I think the tide is turning. I really believe. Naomi, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the academics, and this is part of the problem of, and Frank, what you pointed out, that people are who in academia, if they are critical of Israel, pro-Palestinian human rights, they are fearful. What's happening in UK with your the professor who was under attack?
Sorry, which professor?
The one in Bristol. I think he's in Bristol.
Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry. Yeah, I do. I remember him. Yeah. No, I'm sorry.
I think I heard some good news about him.
Yeah.
That
no, I haven't heard any update.
That there was. Yeah. I think I heard some good news that he was, because he's a big researcher on the Middle East and on Israel, and he just published facts about jailed Palestinians, and he was attacked as being anti-Semitic. I think it actually came up in Parliament, but they were trying to fire him. But I believe that his job was saved. But this is another problem: is that how do you educate people if you can't open your mouth?
One of the things I read in researching this was that the institutions in the UK are being threatened of having funding cut off, and they were talking specifically about the UK. So, you know, that is a constant threat for them.
It's slowly building there. So basically, that deadline to adopt the IHRA definition was the end of December, and a certain amount of universities, less than 50%, I think, did adopt it. So they kind of caved, basically. And then some just didn't and just ignored it for now to see, to see which way the wind would blow. And then a few, like a handful, really took a very strong position by canvassing all the academic staff and the union getting involved and saying to management, no, actually, the people who work here don't want to adopt this. We've got serious questions, exactly as you say about Jackie, about how I'm going to teach if I'm not allowed to, to say this or that. And so University of Brighton is one, and University College London, UCL, is another. If you want to look at, anyone watching this wants to, see how that's playing out. So it's a kind of a question ball back in the government's court now. The government said we're going to cut all your funding. Well, it hasn't done that yet. And also there's very strong legal, reasons why they can't do that. So so that's another way that it could be challenged as well. But that's a risk, because then you've got to put your you've got to pay your lawyers, don't you, to defend you.
I think we have to figure out what are the strategies. Sarah, I think that what you're saying, why is America so fearful of criticizing Israel? Well, they've criticized them in the past, and what's changed? What's changed now? And I think a lot of it is following the money. When you look at the issue, the academic oppression, the BDS legislation that's in all the states, got introduced in all the states. Israel's been very clever at seeding in legislatures. They're working very hard in state legislatures to produce anti-Palestinian legislation and pro-Israeli legislation. And I think it's a question of strategy, and they're masters at it. They're really very good at it. And I think we have to figure out strategies that will be as successful as what Israel's doing. And I think we have the young people on our side. Young Jews are, have a totally different outlook about Israel. You see the Black Lives Matter connected with the Palestinians. And I think you have now a shift, and it's up to us to figure out, how do we direct this shift? How do we take advantage of this shift and not just we miss the opportunity?
I agree with you. And I think that even in Israel, there's a large proportion of disenfranchised groups that are not Palestinian, but, non-European, people of non-European heritage who came there, more recently than the Europeans, and also LGBT, young people are, opposed to, BB and their policies. And also, I think from what I've read, I think a lot of Israelis are getting very disgusted with the influence of the really religious Jews in Israel, the ones that, live on Social Security or whatever it is, on welfare in Israel, and don't, get drafted and don't contribute anything to the country. And I think there's a movement of, we don't have to protect these people anymore.
I'm going to have to leave pretty soon at
just
exactly
wanna-
10 o'clock. So Farid?
Yeah, I want to say a few
Go
things.
ahead, man. Yes.
When I mentioned the word ditch, I was talking about the two bills that were submitted earlier. That's why I meant
I see.
ditch.
Got it.
I've never, in a million years, I've never even would ever say ditching Israel with the US. I don't know. That's going to be a miracle. What I want to get back to 3 points, and I want to address a little of Sarah's 20, 30 questions about Israel. All started the wrong way. It all started on our cost, the indigenous people. We were never asked, we were never anything, we were never nothing, and Israel existed. And you're saying you're glad Israel is there. I am not, because it is not existing on the right track. I thought it would exist on justice, peace, equality, but that's never going to happen, and it never even started that way. So I just want to address that point in a very, very short time, because I would need 3, 4, 10 days to answer that. Israel.
Well, I'm not happy it exists the way it is.
I understand, and I know you said that, but what I'm going to get back to is, why is Israel never ever sanctioned? Just what's happening in Russia right now. Biden is sending sanctions down on Russia already.
Mhm.
Israel never, almost ever gets sanctioned. And they have a free card. That is, I want to bring up. And I know it might have to do with the bill or not, but that does have to do with the bill. They have such influence on certain Congress people, and they do infiltrate the money, and they hide it well, how the money goes to them. And they give them free trips and etc. But the sanctions is what I want to mention. And also, as long as we have Netanyahu around, Israel has moved to the far right so bad that the Peace Now movement is non-existent. The people in Israel are so hawkish, and they have no, and nobody is talking about the Palestinians who live in Israel, 1.5 million, 20% of the population. It is not mentioned in that bill. I think she's going to be blacklisted. Whomever wrote it, McCollum, she's not gonna, she's gonna have a tough battle, and they're gonna go after her. That's what I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
And the brainwashing and the media is an expert. Israel is an expert on that one.
Yeah, but
An
McCollum,
average
you know,
person I
yeah,
talk to
yeah,
who's not even Jewish tells me, but they were there 2,000 years ago, and that's like a stab. It's
yeah,
like
definitely.
if
But
everybody
what's
talks like that about the world.
what's motivating this bill now? I'm trying to think that the ICC decision is, I think they're floating on the aura of the possibility of the potential that some Israeli leaders, including maybe an American leaders, if they're added as accomplices, will be judged war criminals. And they're floating on
I
the aura
agree.
of this. And I think this could be, I think we could talk about what's motivating this bill now that, as we know, they tried before, you're right, Farid, it didn't work, but this type of bill should have been submitted long ago with some more teeth in my mind. But I think it has something to do with that because I'm working on the complaint now, the full complaint, and I'm seeing, especially with respect to Obama, clear accomplice to war crimes of the 214 Israeli Gaza war, where so many Palestinians were killed and women and children and so forth. But in any case, I think that's relevant of why this is happening now, and that it's possible. It's possible, even it's going to be very difficult to add Trump, Pompeo, and Obama to this complaint, but the potential is there. And I think they're floating on this as partially a motivator, among other reasons, of course, to submit this bill now. And I have hope that you're right. Even though it may not succeed, it will bring the spotlight back on freedom for Palestine, and the United States is supposed to be supporting. Theoretically, we're supposed to be supporting humanitarian policies, which we are clearly not. So I'm thinking before I leave now that this bill is important for that reason. But I think the politicians have another reason to adopt, and I'm thinking a little cynically here, and I believe it's true, because every American, if their money is being used, or you don't have to have your money, by the way, Jackie, being used for you to have the right to speak out against a massacre or atrocities in another place, remembering the Avatar tree. But these politicians, I know they are thinking this in the back of their minds. They're going to have to say and do something specific now, because they can be hauled in, theoretically, as accomplices to these war crimes. And there's clear evidence I have seen, and I'm going to have to support it in the complaint now, that Obama committed war crimes along with Netanyahu, especially with the Gaza. But there's other things with Trump and Pompeo, with the settlements to be added. It's more complicated.
Pompeo.
I think this may another motivating factor, because the politicians are realizing you're
going
to have to step up, because we personally, if we don't do anything, say anything, we could be considered also accomplices to the actions of our government.
What strategies, Norvi, welcome, by the way, Norvi Bullock. What strategies do you think would be the most effective for us, for people who are, concerned about this and want to shed the spotlight? what strategies do you think are the best to try to follow?
First thing comes to mind is stop paying taxes. That's my first intuition. Another policy is start listening to what really is going on, just like in Europe. They do listen. They do pay attention to other nations, but it's always sided by the US. We actually need to uproot the thinking of Washington of how they tackle things. It's a good question. I would stop paying my taxes and let them take me to jail. That's what I would do.
People are doing that here around the environment for Extinction Rebellion. Yeah, I mean, talk about the bill
Obama
myself.
signed a $40 billion. Obama signed a $40 billion aid deal to Israel. He was the most president that gave money to Israel. Obama. I was shocked.
Well, I mean, you have a situation where, you know, they ran out of Israel ran out of ammunition during led, and then America and the UK just, you know, replenished it in the middle of the bombardment.
In 2014, let me be specific. July 16th, Obama made the statement. Yeah, it's too bad these civilians are dying, but Israel has the right to defend itself.
And yet, bullshit.
At that point, 200 people had already died, mainly women and children, many houses destroyed. And then 3 days later, and I'll piggyback onto what you said, Naomi, 3 days later, the government approved, because Israel asked for more ammunition, just tons and tons of ammunition. So this is one of the grounds, more specific grounds upon which Obama could be hauled in before the International Criminal Court and judged a war criminal. Yeah. He had an opportunity.
It's good to hear it. It's very good to hear it.
Because he had leverage, he had influence, and this is part of aiding and abetting as an accomplice to a crime. If you don't have to pull the trigger, but if you have an important role of influencing or encouraging a crime on the international level, whether it be international or local, you are just as guilty as the person who pulled the trigger.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I'm thinking, because I live on the West Side Highway, my apartment looks over the West Side Highway, and I'm trying to think of a technology to maybe shoot a hologram on the side of the building with statistics. I mean, I love the Electrona Infantata. I read them every day. They have the greatest articles, and they're very factual, very research-based. And I would love to just project, you know, things on the side of the building of West Bethany. I'm trying to, if anybody knows about the technology or has any ideas, you know, I could hang a sign out the window. I hung out a big sign for Black Lives Matter, but the wind, you know, knocks it around and stuff. I think it'd be much more dramatic to do some kind of hologram with text and pictures or whatever that you can change on the side of the building. There was a huge billboard when you walk along the high rise here around 24th Street. There's a huge billboard, pro-Palestinian billboard. Have you seen that, Fareed and Frank, and Sarah walking through New York? It shocked the hell out of me when I saw it. I haven't been there I walked by, but a huge billboard that some artist paid for and did. And the billboard was all about all the violation of Palestinian human rights that Israel perpetrated, it with the statistics. It was just this fabulous.
Can you show that to me? I'll be in New York in 4 days.
Well, we'll walk up the High Line.
And I have family issues, so I have to leave now, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this.
Yeah.
Thanks for your comments, Fareed, Naomi, Sarah, Jackie. We'll be in touch.
My teeth. We got to file our teeth and figure out how to get teeth into it, you know.
Make them sharper.
But you're right. You know, yeah.
Okay, see you later.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you, Frank.
Good to see you. I love you guys, man. Keep her going. Keep her going, man.
Yeah, we're gonna. Yeah. So actually, our time's almost up anyway. Does anybody have any ending comments about possible strategies that you might personally be able to do or affect and suggest?
I think culture is important. This film that's been nominated for the Oscar, The Present by Farah Nablusi, very powerful
Yeah.
short film showing life under settler colonialism, you know, the
Yeah.
cage, you know, Palestinians caged every day, the humiliation, you know, the point at which anyone would just lose it.
Yeah.
Very powerful film. It just won a BAFTA here in the UK. That's doing a lot
Yes.
to, you
Yeah.
know, to educate people. So, you know, what I'm doing right now is working with Fareed on his poetry, and I think, you know,
Yes.
it's a book. It's going to be a beautiful book. It's very moving, powerhouse collection.
Yeah.
So, you know, that will get the word out because it's really, you know, his poems are so human. There's so much about, you know, his
Yeah.
childhood,
Yeah.
you know, the effect that this has had on him, living this life that he's been forced to live. So I think that people are afraid to engage. People who are on the outside who don't know anything about it, they're afraid to engage, afraid people are anti-Semitic, they're afraid because they think it's very complicated. But in fact, it's, you know, at the heart of it, it's not complicated because, um, you know, you have people who were, you know, ethnically cleansed from their land, and the people who moved in, okay, that, you know, okay, they're not going to go anywhere, but they have to, uh, you know, they have to acknowledge the human rights of the people who they displaced, and they have to negotiate with them, or they will never live in peace, you
Yeah.
know. So,
uh,
But
you know,
it's also very,
and anyone on the outside can just see that, you know. So you have to keep putting pressure, and Sarah's in an excellent position to do that. She's doing it in her own family,
yeah.
changing that mindset. Yeah. So I
I'm,
don't know.
What
To
I'm,
it,
me, to me, telling the human stories, you know, as much as I
yeah.
can. That's what I try and, you know, put my energy into. I think it's maybe where I'm best. What I'm
When will
best.
the book be published? When will Fareed's book be ready?
It should be June. I
June,
think it's June.
Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful.
Hmm.
but
Congratulations. Well,
I'm gonna jump in where Naomi is talking about the
Hmm.
childhood.
Hmm.
Uh, my poems are simple. I write them. I read them for the when she wrote a little excerpt statement. She exactly captured what I'm doing, and I'm not trying to do any. I'm just writing them. I'm writing them as a child, actually. I childhood was so traumatizing. I want Sarah to hear this. It
mhm.
was so traumatizing. I'm a child no more. And I mean that when I write a poem, I'm a child no more. I feel it. I mean it. I know the weapons names. I don't know the toys names. So my book is for the people, from the people to the people. But my book is also for the US to read it, which is a strategy of mine. I want to keep telling Americans, Jews, non-Jews, Christians, non-Christian, what we are going through. I'm a witness. My family is my other 4 million families to a strategy that the more we're going to keep talking, we're not going to go anywhere. And Israel has to deal with us, whether they're going to take us out, snuff us out, kill us out, take the children to the jails. We're still going to keep talking. The more we talk, the more effective things will get. Why? Because look at BDS. It's really effective. It's not going away. We're not going away.
Yeah.
We're in about 10 more years, we're going to be more than the millions of the Israelis in Israel. So they know that. And they're fearful of it. And
Of
they're going to
course.
keep paying money for the Congress for us to be
Don't
controlled.
use the word they, because Israel has a
Israel.
huge amount of people who are against Netanyahu, against the occupation. There
We
are, of
don't
course,
hear from
this as self-hating Jews. But if you read the Bible, that the Israel has always, Jews have always been divided into different warring groups and factions. The Maccabee rebellion was basically a civil war between the ultra-Orthodox Maccabees and the Hellenized Jews, the more liberal Jews. And the prophets have spent their, you read the prophets and all they do, it sounds like they're talking about Israel, oppression of the poor, oppression of widows, children, violence, theft. You read the prophets and it's like phenomenal. It's like they could be looking at Israel right now. And what do they do to the prophets? Of course, they kill them. But
Uh,
that,
I,
that that prophetic strain within Judaism itself, I trust, and that's what I think Jewish Voice for Peace represents. that Jews are not a monolith, that there's a lot of Jews who are embarrassed. That's why a lot of them are quiet, because they're embarrassed about Israel and
Well,
also
They need
afraid
to
of their
talk.
families going
talk.
after them.
Fareed,
That's
They
changed.
need to talk.
I went to Israel for the first time when I was in my early 20s, and I had a cousin and an aunt who were born in Israel, and or my cousin was. His mother came from Europe, and my sister was divorced, and she had a date coming to my aunt's house in Tel Aviv to pick her up. And my aunt said, "You can't go out with this person because he's not the right kind of Jew. He's not the right color." He was, I don't know if he was Jews from Yemen were there then, but he was obviously not a European Jew. And as a young person, I was so offended and horrified because I thought Jews were murdered for being Jews. How could they carry on this hatred? How they have a moral responsibility to, because of what they suffered, to act on a higher moral plane. And that's what I couldn't understand, and I still can't understand it. They have more responsibility to make their country a true democracy, or what to, respect everybody's human rights.
Unfortunately, the psychological,
If they can't do that.
unfortunately, in psychology, the dynamics often abused children become abusers. Abused people follow the pattern and become abusers. So this is a pattern, unfortunately, well known in history and in just, society. So I think that's part of the problem, is that they've grown up abused and they perpetrate it, and you have to, that's what Gandhi said, we have to break the cycle of violence, because violence is a cycle. You kill my family, I'm going to kill your family. So
But is that fair to us? Is that fair to us? I'm living, I just met a cousin of mine, first time ever, and I'm collecting my family in 20 different countries. That is not fair. It's not fair. My aunt, my uncles are dead and dying, and I hear about them in the news. It's not fair. It's not fair to us.
No, it isn't.
You don't have to pay the price. My family's in 20 different countries. I don't know where they are. I met my cousin. She's a writer and wonderful. I didn't want to leave her. I couldn't eat. Just 3 days ago in Washington, D.C. And she tells me I'm your cousin. And she has pictures of my father in the 50s. I left her and I cried.
But Fareed, the important thing is you keep the heritage alive. The Palestinians are very good in the diaspora at preserving Palestinian heritage and culture, and I've been supporting that for years. When I was in Jordan, when I was in Jordan teaching in Jordan, I had all of my Palestinian students doing research projects on their Palestinian lives and their Palestinian backgrounds and family stories. Phil Hopper is working on oral history from Palestinian families. So I think that what's happened is totally unfair. I mean, my heart breaks whenever I think about it, when I go there and see what's going on. But the good news is that Palestinians are not going away. You're not being quiet, and you're not erasing your history or your identity. And to me, that's very important. That's really very important.
I said that in my book. I'm not going to be erased. I'm not going to be erased. I refuse to be erased.
The sad thing is that Israel doesn't understand that the world is changing. In the United States, and this, just not to talk about Palestinians for a second, but it relates to what you were saying, Fareed. Native Americans are rediscovering their heritage. They're fighting for their rights now in this country.
Yeah.
And they also are saying exactly what you're saying. We refuse to be erased. And the United States certainly tried to erase them by sending them to schools when they were little children, taking them away from their parents, not letting them speak their, native tongue. So
They massacred them.
not
17
new
million
for
of
us.
them.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
why we have so much in common with Israel, because it's not new for us to do this to people.
No.
Well,
They
everybody,
massacred
thank you
the
so
natives.
much for all your comments and stuff. I think it's been a very rich session. And I think, Sarah, what you're saying is really, we have more questions than answers. And that's good, because that's the first step in wisdom, because if you start out thinking you have the answer, you're in trouble. So I think we now, through this discussion, have probed and realized how many questions there are. And we have to keep questioning, and we have to question ourselves, or what we're doing, is it enough? Is it adequate? Is it focused? How can we improve our contribution along this way? What can we do? And we have a responsibility, which is scary, because most people are ignorant or they don't care. What was it? Margaret Mead said, in order to change a society, you just need 5 or 6 committed people, that the majority of people will not do anything out of their comfort zone. But fanatics like us, crazies like us,
I
we're the
don't
ones who can
consider
really do something.
I don't consider myself a fanatic. I consider myself maybe trying to be a moral human being. And the fact I know you're alienated from your family, Fareed, because they were forced to leave and go all over. I feel alienated in New York City, that has more Jews than anywhere in the country. I feel alienated, except for JVP, from the Jewish community. I could no sooner go into a synagogue and feel at ease than I could go into evangelical.
But that's what we should do, Sarah. I should start going back to my shul and open my mouth. I've been afraid to do that for years.
I'll
But
go with you. I'll
we
go
should
with
go.
you.
Let's go together. We should go. We'll pick a nice liberal shul and we'll go and open our mouths. Because I was giving presentations to groups, church in this group. I gave it to actually our little sorority of people, whatever their name is, Delta Kappa Gamma. And I was just looking at it 6 years ago. I gave it on my peace thing that I did to Gaza and everything, and they loved it. Now they're mad at me because they consider me an anti-Semite. But 6 years ago they listened to my stuff, so I have to kick myself in the butt and get back out and open my mouth. All of my friends in New York, almost everybody's a Jew, and they all hate Israel. They're all mad at Netanyahu and the occupation. So, but I live in Greenwich Village, so I'm very, very isolated artist. It's tough, but I know my family is softening, but still it's a battle. I have to be very careful holding
I
my
think we
breath.
need to connect with young people because it's a generational struggle. It's going to take more decades, isn't it, really, to get to where it has, eventually the place that it needs to
I
be.
agree. I
Long
agree.
time. And also they have a lot of power. Young people have an amazing amount of power because they are really, when young people are energized, they're very single-minded. They haven't been crushed by life. They haven't got,
Right.
they're still hopeful. And you see
Right.
that now with the refuseniks in Israel. You see it with the young Jews from America coming over, and they take the money to get the plane, and then when they get off the plane, they say, "Bye, I'm going in the minibus with the Palestinians
Right.
to the West Bank." And they're learning, and then they're spreading all of that on Twitter,
Yeah.
and well, I don't think they're on Facebook anymore, the young people, but
One,
Yeah.
I
one
agree.
I
very
think that that's
promising,
awful.
one of the very promising
I think we
things
can
is
connect with them.
the JVP meetings.
Mhm.
I'm astonished at how many young people they have.
Mhm.
And it's wonderful to see, because those are the ones, they have a combination of people in their 80s and 90s who were radicals, early on in this country, and then not so much middle-aged people, but then the young people. And that's wonderful, because those are the ones that are going to have to carry on
Yeah.
educating people
Yeah.
about what's happening.
And that's why Naomi, what you're doing, teaching the university is so important. Teaching is to continue to be brave and speak out and not be frightened off. But it's sometimes easier said than done. I still think I may be in trouble for these Zoom meetings. I think I mentioned to some of you, NYIT cut my Zoom account because of these meetings. So I have to see if they're going to give me another course to teach. I may have lost my job there because of it, but you can't be afraid. You just have to go on and do the right thing. That's the important thing. Just keep.
I was gonna say, I wanted to, Naomi, I want to tip my hat to you for your courage. You have that, and I love that about you.
Yeah.
Since I met you way back, I just want to say that. But on my behalf, I'm just gonna keep talking, Sarah, and the rest of the world. If you can hear me, I'm gonna keep talking. I'm not going away. I'm gonna do as much as I can. I'm gonna paint as much as I can. I'm gonna keep going until I stop, which is when I'm dead. But I'm gonna keep going. And I love my people. The Palestinians were resilient. And I'm just gonna say that. We are resilient. We will not give up. We don't kneel. We don't give up. And that's why Israel, the government, is afraid of us. And let the whole world hear that. I'm a poet. I'm a human. I'm not a fanatic. I'm
And
a
is
human.
mightier than the sword, as they said, right? So on that note, we're not going to give up. We're going to keep speaking truth, and let's encourage each other, okay? And keep each other updated on any brilliant ideas anybody might have, strategies about what we can do. I think it's the time is changing. I think we have more hope now. So thank you everybody for being on. And
Thank you.
what I'm trying to do, I keep contacting young groups of the Students for Palestine. I'm having a terrible time because in COVID, nobody answers their emails, nobody answers the phone. If anybody has any connections with student groups for Palestine, Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP. I keep on contacting them, but I'm not having any luck. So if anybody has any contacts, I would really appreciate it because I'd like to hear from some of these young kids. Okay, Masalama. God bless everybody. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Naomi. So good to see
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Beautiful
Thank you
face
both.
again. Thank you,
Bye.
Fareed. And Norby, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Masalama.
Thank you.